I'm ChosenArchitect, and this is All the Mods Volcano Block. Now, last episode, we went over the basics of automating the inscribers and also getting a very simplistic version of Applied Energistics set up. And this right here doesn't really use but two channels. It uses one for the screen and one for the inventory storage bus. So that's really it for this. Today, we're going to be getting into a lot more advanced parts of Applied Energistics, and that includes how to manage your channels, which we're going to talk in depth about that. And I'm also going to get into autocrafting. So we're going to get all of our autocrafting set up, and this room is going to start looking more Applied Energistics-y. Now, I want to try my best to explain Applied Energistics in the best and easiest way to understand possible. And to do that, let's first make ourselves a controller here. So I need some skystone, and once we get ourselves a controller, I can start to explain how Applied Energistics works a lot clearer. So with a basic sort of network, I want to try to explain this in blocks, but that way we're all on the same sort of page. So let's just think of it this way. By default, on a network that just utilizes a cable that is connected to the same power that we have here. To put this in perspective, this one cable can support 8 channels by default. And that means if we go ahead and have a line of these cables spread out, and we consider each of these blocks something that utilizes a channel, such as a crafting terminal, or a storage bus, or a wireless access point, or any of the machines, this is going to use a channel. And so let's just think that these are connected. And you can see right here, we can have up to 8 machines connected to this line. As soon as we go over that, and we have 9 things on this, well, that means that this is overloaded and they will not work anymore. We have too much on that network. Now, this is how a basic network works. And this is what you get by default that can run through these Fluix ME glass cables. For example, over here, these glass cables are using up 2 channels, I do believe, because I don't think the energy cell counts as a channel. There's only one way to tell, and we'll do that here in a second. But the ME terminal is connected, and that is using 2. You see it says devices online. So how do we actually visualize what we're looking here? Well, the best thing to do is to actually make some covered cables. So I do have some regular cables, some covered cables that I made up. And what we can do is we can convert these covered cables, which just require wool, by the way, and we can go ahead and turn those into smart cables. This is going to require some redstone and glowstone, but it is going to be super worth it because it allows us to see the channel usage that's going on. So if we go ahead and tear this down real quick, we can go ahead and use these smart cables instead, and we should be able to see more clearly what's going on here. So if I hook up onto this back here, we're going to notice this is using very faintly 1 channel right here, as you can see the line on that. And then whenever we put this on here, we'll see that now we're using 2 channels out of a total of 8. And it now tells us up in the top of our screen that I'm using 2 of 8 channels, which tells us that this energy cell does not use a channel. Hopefully that's not too hard to understand. And so if we have too many things on this channel, the stuff just doesn't work and it's no longer supported and will go offline. Now, how do we get more than 8 channels? Well, that's where bigger cables and controllers come into play. So a controller by default, if we go ahead and break this, because I'm going to use this as an example, if we place a controller here, that's going to be powered. This right here, by default, on every single face, supports 32 channels. Now, you'll notice that if we place a regular smart cable on here, that it's saying we only get 8 channels. Well, that's how it works by default with the basic Fluix ME cables. To be able to get access to the 32 that is on this, we need a dense cable. And of course, the same thing goes for this. We can go ahead and convert this into a smart dense cable. And if we put that on here, you can see now we have 0 of 32 channels. That's pretty straightforward. So really we have 8 channels and 32 channels that we can deal with. Now, the thing is, you don't directly connect these normally up to things. You don't normally use these as your main piping system. What I normally do is I take these dense cables and then I run off the side of them the 8 channels. So now we have split the 32 down into 8 over here. And then we can also take more of these 32, and now we have 8 over here. So now we're using, we have the option to use up to 16 of the available channels. And then of course, if we add another side to this and another side to this, that means on every side of the connecting outputs here, we can have up to 8 channels being used in total. And that would all use up eventually the 32 channels that are available off of this one side of the controller. So that is channels in a nutshell, and this is how we're going to handle things. So just keep in mind, if I'm using the controller, these have 32 channels per side, per face, and we can actually extend that using the DINS cables, and then we can route the DINS cables down to the areas we need, and then branch off from the DINS cable. We can branch off 8 channels per side of the DINS up until we reach the maximum of 32 on the side. So that is channels in a nutshell, and I hope it wasn't too confusing. Now, moving forward, you're going to notice I'm going to be using this a lot, and I'm not going to be referencing it a whole bunch. Now, it's at this point that it's starting. Now, as soon as I replace all of these corners, this will take on a multi-block, and I think this can go up to a 7x7x7 in size, being the max size controller you can have. And so in this case, I'm doing a 5x5, but we might end up upgrading later on to a 7x7. It just all depends on how things go. For right now, this should be more than enough for me. But as soon as we place down the corners, it's going to all connect into one fantastic multi-block, as you can see here. And of course, yes, all of these faces are technically usable. We're going to probably make use of most of them. So let's go ahead. I think I have a couple more that I need to make. I think I need 1, 2, 3, 3 more controllers, and we have it. There's a lot of controllers, and I'm out of Fluix. So down here, I have that set up. I went ahead and I have my charger running, and that is taking the charge quartz and making it. And then we use the Fluix dust, and we just simply toss that into water. And this is super satisfying to watch, by the way. Look at this. Boom! It just starts to explode everywhere. I love that. Oh, that's so nice. Okay, so anyways, that is now done. And we should be able to make the next 3 controllers we need, right? 1, 2, 3. And then it's going to turn into this huge rainbow generator. That's what I love about it as well, is the way that it looks. Looks like we need 1 more. Calculations were just off just a little bit. Typical me. There we go. Now it's all one big multi-block. And of course, to be able to hook it in, all we have to do is simply connect up to this. And I think what I'm going to do is right here, I'm going to place this in. And then we can just use, for now, basic Fluix to connect to this. So if I connect this, of course, this is wasting some channels that are directly in the middle. But yeah, there we go. This is all together, and this is what it looks like once you get it plugged in. Of course, on the top, I am going to need to give this a power source. And so I will connect up my energy acceptor to it again. And then we're going to hook in our point. Same way we had it all set up, except now we're using everything through this giant network, right? And we have access to way more channels than just a basic 8. So there we go. That is now filled up. You can see it's using like 264 RF in order to keep this running. And it'll tell us our energy that we're totally using for this whole thing here as well. It looks like 132 AE per tick, which does translate a little bit differently, I think, to RF. And it may be double. That's probably what we're seeing here. We're seeing that 264. So there we go. Now time to hook things into this. And this is where cable production is really going to start to take place, because I'm going to need a lot of cables to move things around, including DINS cables. And then we're going to get our autocrafting set up, which is going to take probably the most amount of resources. Now, right now, I'm working on getting some channels routed down. That way we can kind of have it nice and clean underneath here. And you notice that I'm putting holes in the ground, and there's a way to fix that. What you're going to end up needing is some Certus cutting knives, and you can just cut iron. And then that will make these cable anchors, which have a couple of uses. They can keep cables separated, so you don't end up kind of messing up your channels and stuff like that. But you can also use them to make cable facades. So I've gone ahead and made these cable facades here, and look how cool these are. So of course you can place the facades on the outside like this to sort of hide the panel, but it also allows pass-through. So if you place it like this on the floor, you will notice that we should be able to just directly hide this and it allows pass-through of the cable. So putting this here, it goes right through the ground. Look at that. And it is connected to the cable through the other side. Perfect. Oh, I love that. Now that I have these cables routed, let's start working on getting the auto crafting functionality up and running. Because this is going to be the main reason why I'm setting this up in the first place, right? Is because we want auto crafting. So in order to do this, I'm going to need pattern providers and molecular assemblers. We're also going to need some sort of crafting storage, and we're also going to need co-processing units. So we need to basically make crafting computers, which will be what goes back here and will be multi-blocks. Thankfully, even though this is going to take 9 blocks to make, it only counts towards 1 channel. Same towards the entire molecular assembler, which is going to have, in this shape that I have configured, it's going to have 8 molecular assemblers, and it is also going to have 8 ME providers. I think this will end up using 8 channels in total for this, for every ME provider, pattern provider. So that's why I have it set up in this way, because that will eventually, that'll have 8 per, and that will end up using 8 channels perfectly, whereas this is only going to use 2 channels. And this will allow us to use one of these lines directly for both of the sides. This will be a great example of how we're only going to be utilizing so many channels off of the 32 here. So for setting up the actual towers, what I'm using is my molecular assemblers, and I have my ME pattern providers, and they're set up in this sort of pattern. And this is going to be pretty nice because it's going to allow these providers to send requests into the assemblers, which consider these basically a crafting grid, right? And so the provider can access the crafting grid and then perform a craft inside here. And so it can actually, these pattern providers can work from multiple sides. Given though that your actual crafting CPUs have more co-processing units. Now by default, your co-processing unit, which we're going to set up here in a minute, by default, these can already interact with one molecular assembler. But for every molecular assembler you add, for example, 3, this will now be able to access, this provider will now be able to access all 4 that are connected here. So it can access this one, this one, this one, and this one all simultaneously, and that will allow you to be able to craft multiple things at once very quickly. And so what we're going to end up using is per computer, crafting CPU that we're going to set up, we're going to need 3 co-processing units for each one. Then of course we're going to need storage, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. Storage is a little bit different in how it works. The storage for the actual computers, yeah, they're kind of, there's an interesting way to think about it. So let's think about these storages right here. So these are going to be a part of this multi-block that we're going to be building. And when it comes to crafting, when we actually do our craft, the best way I can think about explaining this is whenever you go to craft something, let's say you're going to craft up a bunch of crafting tables, and that crafting table is going to require 4 stacks to do a stack of crafting tables. It's going to require 4 stacks of oak planks, right? Well, it needs somewhere to store those oak planks while it's doing the initial craft. And so for that, we are going to need these storage drives. And the larger the storage, the more of those planks it can do. So technically, the more stacks of crafting tables you can craft all at once. So I think for us, for right now, going maybe the 4K route would probably be pretty nice. And we might be able to get away with just putting a couple of these in. Of course, you can put multiples in there. But yeah, each one of these are going to require the basic components that you would use to make the normal drives. So yeah, I think that's a pretty decent way of trying to explain how that function works. So now the fun part, now that I've got all of that decided, we can go ahead and set up our crafting storages. And now it talks about it all in here, like I said. So this is a part of your crafting storage, ultimately leading into the full crafting setup. And so I have crafting monitors, I have the 4Ks, and I have enough to get 4 of these going. Now, initially, I think I was going to set them up like so, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to line them up right here. And so I'm going to set up the crafting CPUs, and you can set these up vertically, just like so. Then we're going to have our storage. That'll turn into a multi-block, but I'm not finished there. I'm going to put the crafting monitor on top, and this allows us to kind of see what's going on and what's actually happening inside of this particular computer here. And I'm going to set the same thing up on all of the sides here. And we should have plenty, right? Enough for 4. That's kind of what I crafted up, was enough initially for all 4 of these to hopefully work. And hopefully this is enough to get us by for now. Of course, we can always add more of these, as these are multi-blocks and they only count towards one channel anyways. So with all of these put up, now's the moment of truth. And that is showing and actually being able to visualize how the actual channels work. So down below, if we go underneath here, we have all of these set up. We need to get them hooked in and connected to the power. So what I have is off of the main section here, we have our 32 channels that's being carried on all sides. These are all these are separate 32 channel containers. Now, of course, again, once we hit this 32 point, we can branch off from any of these sides to utilize what we have of a total of 32. So this will give us a nice visualization. So if I just hook this up, which is our pattern provider, which I believe uses a total of 8 channels once hooked up. Yes. So you can see 8 of 8 channels are now being used. And you can see over here on the 32 channel branch that we're using 8 of our total allotted 32 channels. And so the same thing will happen over here. When I connect this up, there's 8 channels being used. And now we're using up 16 of our 32 channels. But of course, that's only connected to one side of our controller. And that's where this piping is coming from. And then of course, on this side, you'll see these are only using 1 channel. You can see 1 of 8 channels. So whenever I connect this, now over here, we have our branch has a total of 2 out of 32 used. And of course, we can keep connecting. Now, keep in mind, you cannot use dense cables to connect to these things. So a dense cable will not connect to a screen or anything like that. You have to use regular Fluix cables to do this. So this is how all of these sort of networks will inevitably end up working, is you're going to have a setup like this, right? And of course, I have it branched over here, trying to limit the amount of channels that are on these lines, and we can always carry more channels down from our controller. And ultimately, that's what we'll end up doing. Like I said, this is probably going to look like some crazy mess of cables at some point, all leading down. But that's the reason I designed it this way. This is our hub. This is like the central focal point of like all of the applied energistic stuff that's going to end up taking place. Now, all of this here is just for simple item crafting. It's just going to allow us to set up patterns that we can go, okay, I want to craft crafting tables. We can craft that. I want to turn logs into planks. I can do that. That's what this is for. Now, processing, that's where things get a little bit more complicated. And I think the first thing we should set up that processes stuff is going to be something that just auto smelts on craft. So let's go ahead and create that. So let's go ahead and get ourselves a process that we can start working with. So I'll place down a point. We'll get that hooked up. And then I'm going to put a smelting factory right here. Now on the configuration of this, let's go ahead and get our upgrades in. And let's go ahead and we'll define all of the outputs. So I'm going to clear them all. We'll have auto eject on. And then I'm going to input from the top, and then out the back, we are going to output. So what I'm going to do is put an ME provider on top of here. And then all we're going to do is just simply pipe back out, and I can just use a pipe. Because mechanism, unfortunately, with this, we don't have an input output from the same slot. So we can thankfully send back into the pattern provider. There's a return inventory in here. Pretty darn cool. And this has tons of options right here. So you have lock crafter until a redstone pulse is received without a redstone signal, all of this, or until primary crafting result is returned, which is, I think, is probably one of the most powerful parts of the ME provider. But we'll just leave it to the way it is right now, so we can just send as much as possible to it. And then we, of course, need to do this. Here in a moment, we're going to get into how the patterns are actually going to work. But we just need to connect a line to this. So directly down here, I will just take my cable and then make sure it's connected in. And now the device is online. This is what we're going to end up using. Now, if you wanted to make this a little bit smaller, you could take this and compress it down and then place it on top. And it just looks like this when you do that instead of a solid block. But it still functions in the same way. And the reason why you'd want to do this, I think, is because you can be directional. I think you can have more than one of these pattern providers inside of a single block space. I think. Don't quote me there. I may be wrong. But this still has the same sort of functionality. So how do we actually make patterns? Oh, also, yeah, it does limit the way that this works. So yeah, I want to go back to the full block so that way we actually have it working that way. So yeah, let's just put it back down. There we go. And now it's going to feed back into this inventory. So yes, I like the way it looks right here. Pretty cool. Now back to what I was saying. How do we actually make patterns and how do we use these pattern providers? And that's where we're going to need an extension off of here. And I think what I'm going to do is use a different color Fluix cable. I think, can we go ahead and dye these? We can. So let's try maybe white. I think white though might take it back. Nope, white actually, I'm pretty sure has a color. So let's go ahead and use this dye here. And we're going to set white as our channel color. And the cool thing about this is it should technically separate off of here. You can see there's a channel of 5. It looks like it's connecting, but it shouldn't be connecting. I don't think. This doesn't have that color. We're going to find out if this actually does connect whenever we put a terminal on here. Put a terminal. Network is booting. It says 1 of 8 channels here, and this is up to 5 channels. So technically, that did more than I was hoping. Now it says six channels. So this is using 6, whereas now it's using 5. Am I seeing this correctly? I think there's some visual bugs going on here, because that looks totally different than what it's supposed to look like. Oh, there's some goofiness happening. So this is the cover cable. Let's, oh, okay, that's why I was using the wrong color. So yeah, just to try and understand. So this is 5 channels. And then whenever I put this on here, this should use one of these channels. It's coming from this side, and it shouldn't update, and it should not be using one of the channels from here. But when I break this, now this is using 1 channel, but is pulling off of the channel list from here, making it now 6. That's very confusing. Even for me, that's confusing trying to figure out what is going on there. I think what I'm going to do to separate it, you can either use cable anchors, but I think I'm just going to extend out from here on all sides to give this kind of cool looking, like hanging terminal sort of look. That way we can have multiple terminals hanging down and we can access them. I think I kind of want to access them from the bottom as well. That's the cool part about Applied Energistics is you can be kind of creative with how everything works. For example, this is the pattern access terminal. This will allow us to access all of our pattern providers that are on the network, that are connected to this whole multi-network. So you can see this is our elite factory smelter, and you can see all of the individual things that we can send into here to smelt all the patterns. Now, of course, we need to craft patterns, and so that is where the pattern encoding terminal is going to come into play. And then, of course, we should also have another terminal. We're going to need a regular terminal, crafting terminal, ME crafting terminal. This will allow us to access our network, but we're going to get into wireless network access here soon as well. And then we're probably going to also need a fluid one because we're going to end up getting into fluids down the road. Oh, never mind. It seems like the normal terminal also handles fluids as well. Oh, that's cool. Now, before I fully set up the patterns, let's go ahead and hook our storage bus back up to this. So we do have direct access to our storage via all of our terminals. And so that's going to make this so much easier now that we can see everything nice and clear. So patterns aren't too bad to deal with. So let's go ahead and make some patterns. So they require this, and this could be one of our first things that we actually craft inside of our pattern terminal. And I typically like to do this. So we'll go ahead and we'll say, make this, and it is going to create a pattern for it. And then what we can do is over here, we can just put this inside of our modular or molecular assembler, and we should now be able to see patterns in here, and we can then request as many as we need, right? In super large numbers. And perfectly, just like that, it starts to craft, and it starts to show up here what is actually being crafted. And it's pretty darn cool. I like the feature that it holds it up here in the top board. Of course, all of that's configurable inside of your terminal settings, if that's something you want to get into. So how do we actually make a processing pattern? Because that's a different sort of thing, right? We need to go here to processing. And I think it might automatically switch to processing, but one of the things that we're going to need with Applied is going to be what? Certus quartz, right? Smelted, we need to smelt Certus dust into the silicon. So we can go ahead and say, create a smelting pattern that smelts this. And whenever we go ahead and code that, we should be able to take that and put it inside of our elite smelting factory. And if I go ahead and request some, I think if we should be able to add, I don't remember if there's what the hotkey is. Maybe you guys can let me know. I thought it was maybe shift and click, middle mouse click. one of these buttons. Maybe you guys know when there's items in here, how do you request? Because I'm not seeing the way to do it. I know with refined, it's shift control. Oh, I did end up figuring this out. Yeah. You have to go into your keybinds, options, controls, and you have to go in here and you have to find your middle mouse button. And if there's any keybind conflicts that are affecting this, such as the inventory sort, which I had to remove, well, that will make it so that way your middle mouse won't work. So as you can see, if I middle mouse this now, it will actually work, because earlier it wasn't working. I was super confused. I'm glad I found that fix. Anyways, let's go ahead and request, I don't know, like a quick stack, right? I wish you could just do a quick stack. There was a 64 button. We start the request, and that should immediately send this down, and it should have started the smelting operation. Of course, put this on split. That's going to work a lot better. And then I think the thing that's going to make it go faster is, of course, our insert. So with the pipes mod, we just want to make sure that we have this going, you know, a little bit faster. Let's just do the diamond tier. And that'll make sure that goes pretty fast. And that's going to get that all back there. And that should finish up our crafts for that. So this is going to be very nice. Very, very nice for setting up all of our auto crafts. And we can do that for all kinds of stuff, including glass, which I think is going to be very handy, as we're going to need glass for a lot of stuff. So we'll just simply set up a smelting recipe for sand. And then it's just as simple as just putting it over here. And there we go. Now we have sand, we have glass automated, and we're able to request it and get all of it nice and processed. Now this same sort of thing is going to apply to these machines as well. So down here, this whole setup that we set up last episode, all we have to do is put a pattern provider on here to send the items. And then of course we can route back from here and finish the craft out of the pattern provider. So I think this is going to be very, very nice. You can also set up priorities on everything. It just makes it so much easier. Now, the last part of this that we need to get set up is our terminal wirelessly accessing. That is what we need. We need wireless terminals, and we need to get access to this whole network via that. That way we can get rid of this Enchanter's Eye, and we won't need access to the Enchanter's Eye, at least for a storage anymore, because we'll fully have transitioned over to Applied Logistics. And to do that, we need a couple of different things. So over here on our actual terminal, let's get into AE2 yet again, and we're going to need to craft up a wireless access point. This is going to be one of the few things we're going to need. This is going to provide the actual access that we need to use a channel for. And so this is where our range is going to be coming into play. So I think for right now, let's just put this right here. And I think that's going to be fine. That's going to use up one of the channels that this is connected to. And now this has upgrade cards that can go into this, and that determines our range. Now in this pack, there is infinite range, which is pretty darn cool, but we'll worry about that when we get to that point, because it's going to require nether stars and stuff. The other things that we're going to need, of course, is going to be the wireless crafting terminal itself, which is going to require a bit of crafting. Yeah, a bunch of these dense cells is going to be needed for this to be able to be crafted. Thankfully, we have all of our processors. I crafted a bunch of them before getting even started into this. So that has really made this whole thing flow a lot smoother, I think. So now we should have a wireless terminal. And of course, that is going to charge up. But you're going to notice it's not linked. And it is very confusing, because at first you're like, how do I link it? Because it doesn't work like refined storage. What we're going to need to be able to link it is a ME security terminal. And this does require a 16K storage component in order to get this functioning and to be able to craft it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply place it right up here into the middle of all of this, which still keeps everything online. It's just going to use, I don't know if it uses a channel. These course cables don't tell me, but to get this linked in, we just put it in here, and now it is linked to our storage, and we can right click and now access our Applied Logistics system nearby. But what is limiting us is our range. So as you can see, I'm already out of range just standing over here, and that's where we need to make the upgrade cards. Now these things are called wireless boosters, but of course we also have the infinite range. This is something that we'll have eventually, right? And this will allow us, I believe, to access in our current dimension. I don't know if there's one that also lets you do cross-dimensionally, but that one will be pretty nice if we can get that. But for right now, we're just going to be stuck with these. Of course, ender pearl dusts. We should be able to craft ender pearl dust without a pulverizer. I think there may be a different recipe that floats around. This is thermal series. Applied energistics. Looks like we can put it inside of an inscriber. There should be one that I think utilizes the hammer. Nope. Applied energistics. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. We'll take a normal ender pearl, and we just basically put it in our inscriber down here, and we can go ahead and use this inscriber. I'll take these out and put that in, and that's going to make all of that dust for us real quick. You can see I was prepping for all of this early on. Tons of processors I've had processing up to prepare for today, but I don't know how many of these cards we can actually make. Let's see, on the boosters, how many of these, I wonder how many of these actually can go in there, or does it even have a limit? I know it's going to cost more power. Of course, the more we use this, the more power this eventually is going to cost. Let's see, booster. This crafts 2. Is it like 16, 18? I don't really know. Okay, so this increases like to 92 meters. So it seems like we can craft quite a few and put them in there. What's our limit? There we go. That's all that we had crafted from the ender pearl. So 32, and that's a range of 197 blocks. That's quite a bit. That is, I think that'll reach all the way out here. No problem at all. Yeah. So the range with that, with just 32 in there, is more than enough for us to at least piddle around our base and get things crafted up. And of course, last but not least, my favorite part about these new terminals in these packs recently is that it can go in a curio slot, which you can go on our head, and then we should be able to go into our options and controls. And let's see, crafting grid. And so I'm going to remove the crafting table and a stick, and we should be able to pull up the wireless, open wireless access terminal encoding wireless terminal. I think this is it. Control E, and let's try it. And there it is. So this is our terminal that is wireless. And of course, I'm hitting Control and E to be able to pull that up now. And now I have wireless access through this method, through Applied Energistics all. And we have it all done now in just simply 2 episodes. This has been quite the journey so far, and it's only going to get crazier from this point. So now, of course, I have a lot of pattern crafting to do. Yeah, you guys don't get to see a whole lot of that because, well, it's not that great watching me craft, I don't know, planks and sticks and everything over and over and over again. But I will get all of those set up and get that auto crafting started and get that process started. But you will see a lot of our processing automations that happen with this mod. So that is going to be happening very, very soon, and we should be able to get an industrial 4 going and start playing around with how fluids interact with Applied Energistics. That's even going to be a new one for me because I don't think I've ever used that before. I've only used it in refined storage, but it can't be that difficult. Should be exactly the same in idea. So guys, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you learned something new. Of course, if you did, be sure to click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and give this video a huge thumbs up. I hope you enjoyed, and of course now it is time to thank the amazing supporter of today's episode. And that amazing thanks is going to go to Entropy Valley. Kind of like that name, pretty sick. Thank you so much for your amazing support, by the way, over on the Discord, becoming a Discord premium member and supporting in one of the best ways possible. Of course, guys, I hope you enjoyed, and of course I will see you in the next episode, and you know how it goes. As always, thanks for watching. Bye!